I am a very old man. How old I do not know. Possibly I am 100, possibly more. But I cannot tell because I have never aged as other men, nor do I remember any childhood. So far as I can recollect, I have always been a man of about 30. I appear today as I did 40 years and more ago, and yet I feel that I cannot go on living forever, and that someday I shall die the real death from which there is no resurrection. I do not know why I should fear death, I who have died twice and am still alive, but yet I have the same horror of it as you who have never died. And it is because of this terror of death, I believe, that I am so convinced of my mortality. And because of this conviction, I have determined to write down the story of the interesting periods of my life and of my death. I cannot explain the phenomena. I can only set down, here in the words of an ordinary soldier of fortune, a chronicle of the strange events that befell me during the 10 years that my dead body lay undiscovered in an Arizona cave. I have never told this story, nor shall mortal man see this manuscript until after I have passed over for eternity. I know that the average human mind will not believe what it cannot grasp, and so I do not purpose being pilloried by the public, the pulpit, and the press, and held up as a colossal liar when I am but telling the simple truths which someday science will substantiate. Possibly the suggestions which I gained upon Mars, and the knowledge which I can set down in this chronicle, will aid in an earlier understanding of the mysteries of our sister planet. Mysteries to you, but no longer mysteries to me. That is John Carter narrating A Princess of Mars. A Princess of Mars by Edgar Rice Burroughs. This is today's Sunday Penguin. And I'm pretty happy to be doing this one because this is one of my favorite books. I first read this, I must have been 13 or 14 years old, I'm guessing. I had heard about this series. I had read about this series in some book on science fiction in the library, the Martian series by Edgar Rice Burroughs, and I just had to read it. And finally, I found a copy of A Princess of Mars. Really loved it when I was a teenager. I still love it now, I have to admit. So I'm happy to be talking to you about this. I am doing the great Edgar Rice Burroughs reread, which is also, if you want to join along, the great Edgar Rice Burroughs read-along. If you want to read some of these books along with me, that would be awesome. David Wiley read this one, and he just talked a little bit about it in a recent video of his. He gave it 3.5 stars, I think. I would have rated it higher myself, but I think that's fair. This book does have its shortcomings, which I'll talk about. So, Edgar Rice Burroughs, he wrote a ton of books, and this was his very first one. This was his first attempt at writing. And as a first attempt, it's pretty darn good. He had a ton of jobs, this guy, Edgar Rice Burroughs, and he was a failure at pretty much everything. And at one point, one of his jobs had to do with advertising. He had to check the advertising copy in these pulp magazines, and he was reading the stories along with doing his job. And he said to himself, I could write a better story than this junk. And so he decided to do that, and he did indeed write a pretty great story. This was published in 1912. Was it in magazine form? I think it was in magazine form when it was published in 1912. I think it was the All Story magazine that this one was published in, if I'm remembering correctly. Fantastic story, in my opinion. So this is the first in the John Carter series, or the Martian series, or the Barsoom series, however you want to call it. John Carter is a former Confederate soldier who is left penniless at the end of the Civil War. He is also immortal, which is interesting. And I kept thinking throughout this book that we were going to learn more about that, and we never did. It's just this odd tidbit. Oh, by the way, I'm immortal. And I can't remember any childhood, and as far as I know, I've lived forever. That's interesting. We never find out anything else about that. It's just like this thing. that you just have to accept. There are a few things that you have to accept in this book. It has some oddities, particularly at the beginning when he was writing the first parts of this book. It reads a lot like a really intricate daydream in the beginning parts of this book. I get the feeling that Edgar Rice Burroughs was a great daydreamer. So he came up with this perfect escape and a perfect alter ego for himself in John Carter. John Carter, who never ages, who's an incredible fighting man, who's immortal, and goes to another planet. That's a lot of wish fulfillment going on right there, particularly for a frustrated guy who failed at pretty much everything his whole life. Not after he started writing, though. Then he became a tremendous success. And this novel was a tremendous success. So John Carter is transported mysteriously to the planet Mars. It is mysterious. You never learn exactly how this happens. Even he doesn't know in the beginning of this book how this happens. Eventually he stumbles upon this secret, but he never shares it with us, unfortunately. It's just headlong action after that, for the most part. He lands on Mars. He's captured by green Martians, which are these 15-foot tall guys with 4 arms and big tusks, and they're green. And they are savage barbarian types, nomadic barbarians. And he is captured by them, but because he has the strength of an Earth person on this planet of lower gravity, he's tremendously strong. And he can leap huge distances. So he's kind of a prototype for a lot of superheroes that come later, because he's got super strength on this planet, on planet Mars. And so he hangs out with the Green Tharks for a while, and then he meets Dejah Thoris, the princess of Mars, who is pictured incorrectly here. She's a bit whitewashed here. She's actually a red Martian princess, because there is a race of red Martians on this planet that look just like human beings on Earth, except for they're a copper-colored red. A lot of human beings on the planet Mars, all of multiple hues, no white people except for John Carter, which is interesting in itself. And so John Carter has to rescue his princess from the clutches of the Green Martians, and then gets involved in a war between 2 big red Martian cities. It's a whole thing. He conquers in the end, spoiler alert. Although it does have an interesting twist at the end. This is a really exciting book. It's a lot of fun. It does have a few things that don't work. One of the things, oddly enough, that doesn't really work well in the first half of this book, at least, is the pacing, which is usually something Edgar Rice Burroughs is great at, is pacing. But he spends a long time with the Green Martians, the Green Tharks, in the beginning half of this book. As soon as he gets away from them, it starts reading like a regular Edgar Rice Burroughs book that is chock full of headlong speed action and fun. So the pacing picks up quite a bit. I get the feeling that he learned a lot writing this book. You can kind of see that. He's kind of feeling his way in this book. So while the pacing isn't great in the beginning, he starts figuring it out. He had a couple books. This one and his second book that he wrote was The Outlaw of Torn, which was a book set in the Middle Ages. That also had pacing issues. By the time he got to his third book, which was Tarzan of the Apes, he was up and running. And he was pretty awesome as far as pacing was concerned from that book onwards. He had other issues that I will talk about eventually when I get to those, but not in this book. So this is the first book in the Martian series. There were 10 books and 1 novelette that he wrote. And the Martian series, unlike some of his other series, the quality holds up through the whole series. In fact, I think the second book in this series, The Gods of Mars, is definitely the best book of the series, in my opinion. There were some other books that were really good too. But the Gods of Mars, I felt, was a vast improvement over this one. And if you read them back to back, you could totally see that. This book has influenced everything in science fiction. It has directly influenced Star Wars. George Lucas has said as much. It has directly influenced Dune. It has directly influenced the works of Ray Bradbury. He has said so. So many writers and so many books have just taken inspiration from this story. Flash Gordon was a ripoff of John Carter of Mars, basically, in a lot of ways. This has been tremendously influential. And so it's, when you read the original, it's kind of interesting because you see all the stuff that was picked up on by other stories and other writers. But he was there first. He had a tremendous imagination, Edgar Rice Burroughs did. He was great at world building. He built a tremendous world with Barsoom. In the course of this series, he has built an intricate, complex world full of different societies and different monsters. It's great fun. And he was very talented at that. Plots, he was limited on. He's pretty good for a while, and then he starts recycling himself later on in his later books. They're always fun, but you do find some things that he'll do over and over again, and like two cities endlessly at war, which you get in this one. You get that in plenty of Edgar Rice Burroughs books. But this is a pretty good start. Little rocky in the first half, like I said, but this book is an awful lot of fun, and I do recommend it. I recommend the whole series, frankly. And like I said, it gets better after this one. So yeah, that was the first Edgar Rice Burroughs individual book that I will be talking about, is A Princess of Mars. It's awesome, and this is a great series. The next Edgar Rice Burroughs book I'll be talking about will be Tarzan. I'll probably be talking about that in a couple weeks, I'm assuming. Got to read Necroscope first, and then I'll get back to Tarzan. So yeah, A Princess of Mars. You should check this book out if you haven't already. Okay, guys, I will see you next time.